What's going on, Bengals fans? Stone Shields on hand for another edition of Bengals Breakdown. And coming up on today's show, we had a combination of some good news and some bad news for Cincinnati. And on today's video, we're going to take a break for a little bit at least, talking about Trey Hendrickson, plenty more Trey Hendrickson conversation to come in the future. But we're going to be talking about some other stuff here on today's show. Christian Sarkisian is leaving. He was a scout for the Cincinnati Bengals. I think more so for the Bengals than other teams in the National Football League. A scout leaving is a little bit more impactful. We'll dive into what exactly that means. Also, some good scheduling news for the Cincinnati Bengals that we are going to get to. By the way, the schedule comes out tonight, and we're going to be having a video out tonight when that Bengals schedule gets released. We'll see some leaks throughout the day as well. But because of that, we are not going to be going live on the channel today. Just a heads up in that regard. Also, Jeff Hobson of Bengals.com has a nice piece out on Seth McLaughlin. So we're going to close out today's show with a little bit of Seth McLaughlin conversation. But before we get into that, make sure you guys share today's video for me if you haven't done so already. Just trying to get the word out there to more Bengals fans that aren't necessarily tapped in to what we are doing here at Bengals Breakdown. Obviously, our goal is to continue to grow here even in the offseason. So help me out. Share today's video for me on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. It works for us. Share today's video for me right now. All right, so Christian Sarkisian is leaving for the Cincinnati Bengals. He is going to take the job as the GM over at Northwestern. He's a guy that's been a scout for several years here for the Cincinnati Bengals and really has been a part of this organization for a long time, even dating back to the Marvin Lewis era, and he's really done a terrific job, as Hobson has pointed out for Bengals.com in his piece, as well as some of the comments that we'll get into from other Cincinnati Bengals people. Duke Tobin, of course, had a lot of good things to say about Sarkisian as well. But here's what Sarkisian had to say in regards to his time with the Cincinnati Bengals. He said, "I feel extremely grateful for my time in Cincinnati. I don't think that there was a better situation for a young scout to learn from in terms of growth. You're with the ownership family every day, that you're in the office, and their only focus is how to win games and be the best at winning games that they can be from top to bottom. I had a lot of really unique exposures just because of the way that Duke and the family have decided to structure the personnel department. The great thing about that structure is you have your hands involved in so much. You can see the importance of communication and operating with a clear plan and being as organized as possible." As I mentioned, I think this is more noteworthy for Cincinnati than some other teams in the National Football League because their scouting department is tiny. It's literally a handful of individuals. When you look at their structure of their front office, obviously it's that Brown Blackburn family. That's the ownership group, right? Got a lot of people, a lot of kids are in the personnel department in the front office of the organization. Then you got Duke Tobin, and he's got a handful of guys. And apart from that, that is really it. So kind of an unorthodox way of running things. The Bengals organization is very much set up as a mom and pop type of business, right? And that certainly has its pros. Certainly has its cons as well. But as I mentioned, they literally only have a handful of scouts. And it looks like they're going to have one new one, but I do want to talk about Sarkisian here and what exactly he did before we get into what exactly that hire looks like for Cincinnati. Again, this is a guy that was here throughout Marvin Lewis's tenure, right? He was charting up in the coaches' boxes for Marvin Lewis's defense. That's kind of how he got his feet wet with the Bengals in this industry, and he also was kind of involved with the Zach Taylor hiring. Now, exactly how involved, that isn't known necessarily, but he was sitting in on those meetings and certainly was a part of that process with Duke Tobin and the ownership group as well, and he helped develop. This is kind of his main thing to hang his hat on here with the Cincinnati Bengals. He helped develop a trade value chart, which he oversaw here in this past draft for the Cincinnati Bengals in 2025. A couple other people in the front office were involved with that as well. We'll see exactly if that trade value chart did some good stuff for Cincinnati with the 6 picks that they had in this year's draft. But it looks like Cincinnati is going to be hiring another scout. This is what Seth Walder, who writes for football analytics for ESPN. He said the Bengals hired Trey LaBounty as a scouting research analyst per his LinkedIn. He had previously been an analytics intern with the Bills. So the Bengals moving pretty quickly here. Sarkisian leaves a couple of days ago, and it looks like Trey LaBounty is coming in to kind of help in that scouting department. Now, as it says here in this tweet, he's going to be more analytics-based, but as Sarkisian was alluding to, if you're in the Cincinnati Bengals front office, you got your hands in all kinds of stuff. You're doing so much because there are so few people in that front office. This is a young guy in LaBounty, right? Played his college ball at Stanford before transferring to Miami University in Oxford, my alma mater. Finished out his career there as well. Also got, I believe, his master's there as well. Worked a little bit, went back to Stanford, worked a little bit there, and this past year was an intern with the Buffalo Bills, as it says here in this tweet. But this is a young guy. Duke Tobin has some trust in him, and we'll see if he's able to, keep up the good things that Sarkisian was doing for Cincinnati. Again, the role isn't exactly the same, but bringing in another scout, obviously big and obviously something that Cincinnati needed to do. Duke Tobin can't afford to miss on these hires because there's such few scouts in this Bengals personnel department. Pin comment time here on today's show. What's your confidence level in the Bengals scouting department? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section of today's show. Scale it for me, 1 on the low end, 10 on the high end. Obviously, we're going to find out here how they did in the 2025 NFL Draft. But regardless, get down in the comment section. Let us know what you think. Scale it for me right now. All right, so some good news here on today's show. Bengals aren't going to be traveling a lot in 2025. Typically, they don't travel much, just kind of the nature of how their division, the AFC North, is structured. But of the 32 teams in the National Football League, the Bengals have the least amount of travel. So I do want to kind of get into what exactly the mileages look like here. Jay Morrison did a great job breaking this down in a piece that he has up for Bengals SI. But obviously, the teams that are traveling the most, right, are those West Coast teams, right? Chargers, Rams. Look at that, 37,000 miles that the Chargers are going to have to travel here. Jacksonville, obviously a Florida team, but they've got to go overseas, play in London, so that certainly affects their travel as well. Another West Coast team in the San Francisco 49ers. And I really think, you guys, if you travel, right, if you're on a long flight and then you got to go do something right after, it can be difficult. So I think this really does have an impact on how teams play on the road. And you look at these teams that travel the least, right? Cincinnati, by a margin here, traveling the least. The next closest team, the Buffalo Bills. Cincinnati, the only team in the NFL traveling under 10,000 miles. So I do think that is an advantage for Cincinnati here. As I mentioned, obviously, the division, right? Cleveland's close. Baltimore, Pittsburgh, all very close together. Their longest trip of this year is actually to Miami, which really isn't that far whatsoever in the grand scheme of things. So no big West Coast trips really for Cincinnati coming up here this season. Now, the Bengals have had this in the past, right? Past couple of years, obviously now in 2025, 32nd as far as most or least amount of travel. 2024, 31st. 2023, 32nd. So the Bengals are always going to be at the bottom here. So I don't necessarily know if it's going to be a major difference year in and year out, but I do think this is a benefit that Cincinnati has when it comes to attacking their schedule here in 2025, and we'll see if they're able to take advantage of it. Thought it certainly was an interesting note that I wanted to point out on today's show. Bengals draft hats are still available. You can get them right now. Chatsports.com/Bengals draft hats, courtesy of our friends over at Fanatics. Really encourage you guys to get over to Fanatics and check some of this gear out. They really have some incredible stuff. Really not just hats, but the hats this year, I think, really they've done a tremendous job with that. So one more time, at chatsports.com/Bengals draft hats, and we'll put that link in the comment section and the description of today's show. I wanted to close out today's show with some Seth McLaughlin conversation. As I mentioned at the top, Jeff Hobson of Bengals.com really has a nice piece out on Seth McLaughlin and what exactly his career could look like here with the Cincinnati Bengals. He was the best center in college football before he popped that Achilles and was still able to win that award as the best center in college football. And a guy that certainly was going to get drafted, and I thought still was going to get drafted despite the injury. Bengals get a major steal, able to get him as a UDFA. I know there was a ton of other teams that had interest in McLaughlin, and he obviously ended up taking the gig with the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll see if it transpires to him perhaps making the team. Before we fully dive into that, will Seth McLaughlin be sticking around in Cincinnati? Let me know what you guys think. Obviously, some questions coming off the injury here. Maybe it's a situation where he's not ready to go, come training camp, despite the fact that is the goal for McLaughlin. But I do think there is a future for McLaughlin in Cincinnati. Let me know what you guys think. Type Y for yes or N for no. Here's what Mickey Marotti had to say about Seth McLaughlin. And Marotti is the longtime strength coach at Ohio State. He's really done a tremendous job and has really worked with a ton of fabulous football players. Joe Burrow certainly one of them. Marotti said this: he just knows how to play the game. Great personality. He'll fit right into that locker room. He's got a little bit of Joe in him. Their humor is very similar, a little bit of dry humor. So I think that's certainly good that you'll get some good chemistry there between the quarterback and McLaughlin. And this is what McLaughlin had to say as far as choosing the Cincinnati Bengals. He said, I love Ohio after being here for a year and a half now. I just fell in love with the place. And being an hour and a half down the road, it wasn't a very hard move. There's a lot of carryover in the fan base and support that I have. I'm super close to Columbus if I ever need anything there. Now, as I mentioned, It's his goal to be ready to go by training camp. It was kind of my way of thinking that when the Bengals got him as a UDFA, it would kind of be, a slow process, right, where he was gradually getting involved and then probably wasn't going to do much this year, and then ultimately maybe next year was going to be able to provide some kind of impact. But that's not the goal here for McLaughlin. He's ready. He thinks he's going to be ready to go come training camp, and I think he's going to have a real opportunity here to compete for a spot on this roster. Obviously, Cincinnati's in a situation. Do they take 9 guys? Do they take 10 guys? We will see. But I think really a competition I want to see here in the offseason is Matt Lee and Seth McLaughlin, right? I think Matt Lee, your guy that you took at the end of last year's draft out of Miami, a lot of people kind of view him as that guy that's going to replace Ted Karras whenever his time comes to an end here in Cincinnati. But I think McLaughlin perhaps could provide a lot of competition for Matt Lee at that center spot. I really love Seth McLaughlin, what he's made out of. He competes out there on the football field. I think he'll really fit in well here to this AFC North. You see UDFAs make rosters all across the NFL in recent years. Cincinnati really should, put a big stake on wanting to keep Seth McLaughlin around, whether it's a situation where he's just kind of on the practice squad for 1 year or what have you. I think a lot of other teams are going to have interest in him. So if he's healthy and ready to go, I think Cincinnati should really think about keeping him on this roster because I think maybe not this year, but years down the line, he definitely could have an impact for this football team and perhaps be a starter. Make sure you guys hit that sub button if you haven't done so already at youtube.com/BengalsTV. One more reminder, we will not be live here on our channel here today, but we will have a video coming out for you guys tonight when the Cincinnati Bengals schedule is officially released. Don't miss out. Hit that sub button for me right now.